Hey, thank you very much. Let's invite all of our panelists up here. We've got a great group of people that are going to be speaking with us. We've got, you can go ahead and take seats, and then I'll introduce each of you. A little bit about myself. I am the clerk and auditor of a county in Utah County. And so we oversee elections locally and have implemented a number of blockchain solutions. I serve alongside Amelia, who's also one of the officials in our county. And you know, today's conference is about infrastructure, and I don't think that we can really talk about infrastructure until we can really understand the word itself. And this is another one of those things that didn't exist when Gerard was born. And that is actually the wide use of the word infrastructure in the way that we use that word today. It really kind of took off in the 50s, 60s, and became more formally adopted in the 1970s. So interestingly, it wasn't always used to describe what we use it to describe today. But when you think about what the word actually means, infra is below, beneath, under, structure is the thing that you build. So essentially what we're saying is infrastructure is the stuff upon which everything is built. And you think about how important this is to human society. You can't have a business if you don't have roads to connect people to your business. You can't have a business if you don't have telecommunication in which you can communicate information and ideas. And so infrastructure is a very fundamental idea. It's the thing upon which pretty much we organize ourselves and commerce. So when you think about elections as infrastructure, that's really fundamental because humans can't interact with one another if we can't get along and cooperate. And elections, at least in a formal sense, have existed in human society for over 3,000 years, as far as recorded history indicates. There's been some way in which we formally assemble ourselves and make collective decisions. But when you think about an even more fundamental type of infrastructure in human society, it's trust itself. We cannot cooperate in society if we don't trust each other. And when it comes to elections, our election system is built on a lot of trust. I trust that when I mail the ballots out that the post office is going to deliver them. We trust that, the local officials that we elect are going to count those ballots correctly. And as an elected official who oversees elections, I can tell you, you should trust me, but you still have to make that choice to trust me and to trust the system that I am operating. And we have a lot of transparency built into the system, but there's still a trust gap. And we've seen, well, it's existed for many years. There's always been trust issues when it comes to elections. But in particular, the last couple of years, there have been a lot of loud voices calling into question our existing election systems. And so now is an incredibly important time for us to look at really the institution of trust itself and how we can incorporate more trust in the institutions that we rely upon that really bring us together and undergird our society. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our panel on election resilience and how we can really protect our election system, not just from objective threats, which sometimes are imagined, but the very real threat, which is this trust gap, which is a perception issue with the public. And I think blockchain can help us. We've got some excellent people here. On the far end, we've got Nimit Sawhney, the founder and creator of Votes, V-O-A-T-Z, one of our sponsors here, a blockchain-powered voting platform that we've used in our county and that other counties have used. Next to him, we've got Christine Walker, also a county clerk in Oregon, one of those rural counties. She sits halfway between Silicon Valley and Seattle, both jurisdictions that she beat to the punch with blockchain voting. And she's very much an innovative pioneer in the election world. She's the past president of the International Government Officers Association, which is a trade association of government officials at the county level, county recorders and treasurers and clerks and those kinds of things. So she has a vast amount of experience in how elections are operated in the nearly 3,500 counties across the country. We've got Eugene, who is proprietor of an actual blockchain voting system and the ecosystem. His banner's was up over here yesterday. And then, of course, we have Mr. President Vít from the micronation Liberland. And I think it's very interesting to think about elections and the kinds of elections that you can have on a distributed scale, because the citizens of Liberland, they often, well, they live pretty much everywhere except Liberland. Is there any full-time residents in Liberland yet? But he sits midway between one part of a river and another part of a river. And so, and here we have a hurricane that just hit Florida, and the governor they're going to have to make some special exceptions for people to vote digitally, because the infrastructure and systems that operate those elections are going to be damaged, and people are displaced. So these are very real problems that are upon us basically in the next 60 days. So let me start with a broad question here, which is, what are the most significant threats to election integrity and resilience? And let me start with you, Christine, and then we'll go to Nimit and come back to Eugene and Vít.
So thank you for having me here today. It was really great. Didn't even find out about it till about a week ago, and I'm really happy to have made the trip out here from the beautiful state of Oregon all the way on the left coast. As an election official, currently living through the environment we are, it has been hard. Being called criminal, fraudulent, those things are really tough to swallow when you know you're doing this job for the better good. And I loved the oath that was taken yesterday about doing good, because that's really what we do. We do good works every day. And in my opinion, one of the hardest things is, of course, they call it mis, dis, and malinformation. But quite frankly, the things that are put out there by their social media sites, there's bad actors. There are people purposefully trying to create discontent, distraction in what we do for whatever reason it may be. It's toxic. It's like a cancer, and it just spreads. Even though a lot of the people spreading this misinformation are not trusted election officials. They don't administer elections. They don't know the intricacies and all the things that are being done to protect the vote, even the processes and procedures to make sure that your ballot is counted exactly the way the voters submitted that, the way they're protected. That, to me, is probably one of the biggest threats right now in elections. The other is a misunderstanding that we always hear all the time. We need to have a good election. What do you mean a good election? We have great elections every election. Is there a perfect election? Absolutely not. I don't care if you are a polling place model, vote by mail model, which Oregon has been. Our citizens voted to make vote by mail the sole way to vote in Oregon back in 1998. So we've had no hybrid model. We've had no polling place model. We have been a vote by mail state. That is the only way to vote in Oregon, with the exception. We have delved into mobile voting for our UOCAVA voters, so uniform overseas and military voters. So lose that perception that there are perfect elections. We deal with issues that we mitigate every election, whether it's a computer that goes down, whether it is a drop site that somebody took out with their vehicle. We have redundancy to make sure we can cover those things. I could give you an array of items that we have happen every election, but based on preparation, based on the policies, procedures, and of course following the laws, we're able to mitigate those items, sometimes easily, sometimes it takes a little more work, especially when you're in the thick of an election. But again, I believe it is the bad information out there that is really causing a lot of discourse, and it's purposeful, and it's toxic, quite frankly.
Let's go to you, Nimit.
Yeah. Firstly, thank you for having me here as well. I would completely agree with what Chris just said. I think misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, everyone should remember those acronyms. It's also called as MDM. that is the single biggest threat we are facing. You might think it's cybersecurity and, cyber actors. That's actually not the main threat. It's the misinformation that's been spread over the past few years and how a lot of us are consuming that on a daily basis. It's not just specific to elections. It's like taken over our entire lives, so to speak, how we are consuming that and how it's changing our behavior. And so that, I think, is the single biggest problem. How we solve it is perhaps the biggest challenge of this time we live in. Besides that, I think there is, and as a derivative of that misinformation, what has happened is when you mix politics with that and mix other partisan endeavors with that, you create serious damage to the trust institution that's been around our electoral process for many generations, as Chris mentioned. For the most part, most election officials around the country do it, with very good process, very good intent. They are doing public service, and to see them get, attacked and defamed, and you'll see almost half of the existing election officials are leaving their jobs because who wants to hear these threats, these nonsense, when you're actually trying to do good, right? I mean, it's so much stress for no reward. And so it is like a cancer. It's a dangerous cancer. We probably will end up with a situation where you don't have enough experienced people running elections, and then you've just made the whole situation worse. So I would say, I think we all need to get together and just take a deep breath and say, look, we may not believe in XYZ political ideology, but let the professional people run our elections, and let's not disrupt their work, because otherwise we're just destroying the whole system.
Before I answer the question, I would like to make an announcement. Gerard and I spoke yesterday, and he confirmed to me that the Government Blockchain Association will be using the voting systems of its members, including Nimit's votes and our devote, to use them in advancement of its membership. So please expect a variety of announcements by GBA as to the upcoming elections of its own members and of its own organization. And I'm very happy to hear that GBA itself will be using the tools, the mechanisms that its members developed for its own life. So that's great, Gerard. Thank you. Now, to answer your question, I think the biggest threat is doubt. Doubt. All of you remember what happened in the most recent presidential elections in this country. A lot of people came and said, well, I don't believe that this president was indeed elected by the majority of my compatriots. And that's the biggest threat. If an election result can be disputed, that kind of ruins the whole purpose of election system. And I think the answer to that, I don't know if you want to go into answering the question, is to remove the aspects of voting systems that leave room for doubt. What I'm talking about, if we were to offer a system that would be, let's say, based on mathematics, and you can prove that the election results are indisputable, right? That you can prove that particular people voted in a particular way while complying with the legal requirement of permanent separation of voter affidavit and voter bulletin. So if we are able to offer those solutions, then the room for doubt becomes a lot smaller and maybe even disappears eventually entirely. Thank you.
Thank you. Vít?
I completely agree with that notion. I think our ultimate goal as we are here basically is to remove the human element from elections. That's what makes it trustless then, and that's basically the best way to go forward. What we are doing with Liberland, we're putting the whole country on blockchain, so all processes starting from voting all the way to budgeting and justice system, it's all automated on a single platform, basically removing, I would say, 60–70% of bureaucracy that the traditional state would have, because we don't need agents that will check anything, because the whole system is basically one smart contract that combines all these elements. And there are some cool things to it as well. We literally can have citizens that could be AI, but they will have the same access to the whole system, because they will have also the private keys to their election. They will have the same access as a human element. And of course, if you lose your private keys, just like with Bitcoin, you kind of lose your access to voting, but we do have also solution for that. We are using similar recovery systems like Polkadot is using for making sure that we can get people back on track. And that's, I would say, only attack vector that we can have in our system. But again, I think we are here to make sure that we basically remove all the distrust, as you mentioned, by removing all the human element that could be ruining the real results of those elections.
So that brings up an interesting point. And we've talked about the trust gap, we talk about the systems, we talk about automation. One of the criticisms of elections is this idea that the election is counted in sort of a black box. And it's not always true that it's actually a black box. Like, you can go and watch the workers put things into machines and things like that. But since the 60s, we've been using some kind of technology solution. Originally it was the IBM punch cards. And if you didn't punch the hole correctly, then you had card hole aggregate debris, CHADs, which created problems for counting the ballots, right? So, but for over 50 years, we've been using some kind of machines of some sort. Now we have more sophisticated digital systems. But there are people in this country who are saying we need to abandon machines. We need to abandon computers. We need to abandon software. We need, paper ballots that are counted by humans. That's the way that some people propose we can have trust in our election. So how do you bridge that gap between a perception that things have to be manual in order to be transparent and trusted, and to actually put more room for human error, versus to digitize and automate but still maintain that level of trust or transparency? Speak to that, Vít, and then we'll go to Nimit and Eugene to talk a little technical details.
This is exactly what blockchain is for, right? Like, you can digitize the whole election and yet make it completely fraudulent because it's based on single computers that everybody can meddle with. And that, I say, is probably the biggest problem of digitizing the elections. But if you really turn it into a system that is running on a decentralized ledger that is auditable, that's solving the whole problem. And we're there yet with guys like this, and I applaud them for pushing it forward. I have a couple of friends that are also pushing for the Trump election already made on blockchain in parallel a couple of years ago, which I don't think it has taken off ground enough, but I think we are here yet, and even countries like United States should actually move to this new age of basically completely auditable elections. But of course, there is this biggest element. How do you check that that person is really that person, right? And that comes back to the fact that, for example, in Czech Republic, where I'm originally from, this big debate of will we allow people vote distantly or will we do online election has actually crashed completely because they have not been able to prove well enough that they are able to make sure that the people that are voting are the people that are voting. So they came back to the idea that really people have to actually walk down to the place and they check them openly and then they let them vote. So, I mean, there is this shadow gray space between, which of course is problematic, and there are, I would say, two ways how to make it very transparent. Give people private keys, let them vote on blockchain, or you have to basically collect the people so that you make sure that those are the people that are voting.
Thank you. Eugene.
Yes, there are several things one can look at in terms of addressing the black box issue. Number one, I believe that the system code must be open source, which would allow anyone, especially the experts in the field, people who understand how code works, to go in and take a look. and verify to sort of general public that they have been through and they do not see any malicious code inserted, and they can verify independently that indeed the code does what it's supposed to do. The second approach is what's called formal verification. And that is, again, software-based tools which allow you to prove that the software app or solution delivers exactly what the technical regs require it to deliver. Now, that's a very complicated area of cryptography and mathematics, so only a few people can understand how formal verification works, but it is there, it is available, and for those who are willing to spend the time and familiarize themselves with the process, it can be done. Number three, again, because in this country we have a legal requirement of permanent separation of voter bulletin and voter affidavit, so you have to ensure voter privacy. There are some, again, mathematical solutions that allow us to do that. One of them is called Gross 16, otherwise known as zero-knowledge snarks, which allows you to prove that a particular person voted without knowing how. And that removes entirely any individual's ability to unilaterally change anything in election results tally. So those are some of the examples what can be done, and I would vote to say should be done in order to remove doubt and make election results indisputable. Nimit?
Nimit.
Yeah, I would take it from a different perspective. I think when you raise the question of people wanting to count ballots by hand, I think we need to step back and remind people, why did computers and machines come into the electoral space? You have to remember one thing: human beings are not perfect. Human beings will make more mistakes, and human beings will definitely make more mistakes than a well-designed machine. A well-designed machine, a simple machine based on math, never makes a mistake. Once you program it well, test it well, it will keep doing what you tell it to do again and again. 1 + 2 will always be 3. You can do whatever you want, the result will never change. And look at the notion of counting ballots by hand. There are 330 million people in the country. Let's say about 160 million people vote. If on election night we are counting all those ballots by hand, when will you expect the result to come out? As it is, we have so much problem when on election night the TV networks are not able to declare the winner. You know, we've already seen in recent history. Imagine waiting a week to get the results. Imagine the turmoil. That's not a solution. I mean, look at other parts of the world. India is the biggest democracy. 800 million people vote in an election over there. The whole reason why India moved to electronic voting machines was because it was taking them so long to count ballots by hand. It was, you make one mistake, you have to read the whole batch. It would take so much time. Literally, I remember growing up, election counting day was a national holiday because everything would shut down. Millions of people are out there counting ballots. The TVs would show movies, and then every hour, okay, we've counted 1% of the ballot, we've counted 2%. And it became so slow, you could not count all the ballots in 24 hours. And we were like, this is crazy, we can't do this. And so that's why machines came in, and we have to remember that. At the same time, machines can have vulnerabilities. So it's really important that the machines we use are simple, transparent, and do what they're supposed to do. So I think people need to be kind of almost reminded of that reality, that machines are here to stay. They're not going away. Counting ballots by hand is not an option. Like, it's an option in a worst case scenario, but it's not the thing you want to do as a normal process. Second, I mean, there are technological solutions like Eugene mentioned, and a whole different sets of systems available. But the challenge we have there is less than 1% of the population is going to understand what a zero knowledge proof is, right? You can't go to the masses and say, trust an election on the blockchain because it has zero knowledge proof. People are going to say, oh, what does that mean? I'm not a math expert. I don't know what this means. How can I believe you? Maybe you rigged the whole thing, right? So that's also not a solution that scales well. You have to come up with a process which the common person can understand in a non-technical language, and at the same time give them the assurance that my vote is private, my vote cannot be tampered with, and I, as an individual, can easily audit my vote without needing a mathematics PhD. I think those are the singular things which can rebuild trust in the system and also in new systems that are going to come in the future. So we shouldn't lose sight of that.
So we've talked a little bit about this trust gap and maybe future systems like blockchain. I'm going to ask you this question. And right now, our systems are reviewed by experts. So Eugene, you talked about, this small percentage of people that are the experts, that they can investigate the machine, so to speak, and tell the public whether they should trust it or not. And we do this formally right now in the United States with election equipment, at least with the current and past generations of election equipment, and that's the certification process. One of the members of our panel who wasn't able to make it on account of the hurricane was Don Palmer, who is a commissioner on the Federal Election Assistance Commission. And one of the things that they're involved in is sort of setting standards and guidelines upon which you can review systems to ensure that they meet them. Christine, talk a little bit about this, because I think this is one of the barriers to the next generation of election equipment or systems, digital and remote systems, is how can the public trust those systems when those systems are so new and innovative? How do we solve that problem? Christine, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and I just want to agree with you all. I know we have different perspectives when it comes to elections, between security, between conducting elections, between being a business partner. And I always refer to anybody that we contract with as a business partner. Vendor to me means you have a product we want, and they want your money. We truly are a business partner. You have expertise, both of you, and all of you, in things that I am not an expert on, but we depend on you to partner with us in that realm. So I did speak with Commissioner Palmer actually Tuesday, and he let me know that he wasn't sure if he'd be able to make it, and sure enough, he couldn't get a flight out, but he did leave me with a message that he wanted to pass on to the group, a very encouraging message. So he asked that we encourage the EAC to test and certify ballot delivery and return. Set standards and test in accredited labs, just as we do with all of our tally equipment, the voting machines, et cetera now. EAC protocol development for end-to-end, E2E, was a great potential for this community to be involved in, meaning this community here. Having a hard time reading with the bright lights. With software independence requirements in VVSG 2.0, this is an exceptional opportunity for blockchain technology providers. And that is from Commissioner Don Palmer. I believe certification, in my mind, would go a long way to basically provide street cred to what we do and to your systems. I just want to relate to, and I love when you spoke about the GBA now using your products to be able to vote with. When I was president of IGO, the International Association of Government Officials, in 2018, I also recognized within our bylaws that the sole way to vote through that government association was polling place, or basically you had to be there to vote. And one of the items that we did get passed through was to change in that bylaw to allow alternate voting methods. Purposefully, and because we, of course, are a vote by mail state, but we are also using alternate voting methods, such as mobile voting. It could be a variety of different solutions. We just happen to use the Votes product. This will be our 6th election in November that we have used that. We, as well as Utah County, use that in the November 2020 presidential election. So I believe we'll be the only 2 counties in the entire country to use that as a solution for our UOCAVA, military and overseas voters. At least in Oregon, we didn't have the ability to expand that to disability community. But last year did have a legislative bill in the short session, which it didn't go anywhere, but it did educate a lot of people on the technologies, and we're hoping that in the full session that's brought back so that we can expand that to possibly disability community, out-of-state absentee voters, first responders in the case of a natural disaster such as yesterday. We had wildfires that ravaged 2 communities a month before our election, month and a half, back in 2020. I would love to have been able to roll that out to some of those folks there. So anyway, where we go.
You know, it's interesting you talk about things like natural disasters. We think about Florida, we think about wildfires. You know, you think about the election system, it's very physical right now. Humans have to physically go to a particular location in their community. We have to physically maybe mail a ballot to somebody where they are physically located. Our systems are designed you know, to be administered by government officials. And we do that because, well, we say, well, we trust government. You know, yeah, I mean, I don't get my milk and cheese and bread from the government. No offense, Eugene, perhaps your home country did that at one point in time. Didn't work out so well. The private sector provides those things, right? Does government have to be the solution? Does government have to be the one that administers elections? What does the future look like if we can trust a system that we all collectively own that's decentralized? This is, I think, the promise and the vision of blockchain. What does the future hold for truly decentralized? If we're going to have decentralized government and decentralized elections, you know, we really are returning to the people their power. And so talk a little bit about what the future might hold from a decentralization perspective. Let's start with you, Vít.
I think this is actually exactly what we're doing right now. We're running these master nodes that are actually operated by citizens. Any citizen can actually start his own computer at home and become a master node of the system. You're not supposed to be political. That is actually something, if you would change the code that you're running, that is something that could result in your losing of the status in Liberland. But I think it's a great way that literally every citizen can start a computer at home, and then right now it's set up that randomly selected 40 basically nodes out of that pool of all citizens that are running that infrastructure get selected, and they are confirming the transactions. So I think it's a good way to go. It is enough. There is enough decentralization while we are not destroying the speed of the network. So even if, like, let's say, if we had more like 400 people, then it would slow down the network, and it's unnecessary. But right now, those 40 people make sure that the whole network runs fast and it's secure enough. And then what these nodes are actually doing, they're making sure that all these votes, all these budgeting, all these decisions by justice systems, they are running on neutral platform, which you can trust and which anybody can audit as well.
Great. Eugene.
Yes, this is a great question. I think if you look at the solutions that appear these days, which allow for end-to-end decentralized and open source and mathematics-based solution, in addition to governance tokens held by all eligible members of a particular society, then the functioning of governance is going to change. If you are able to make decisions quickly based on software secure enough and trusted by people, then you can make decisions not just who do you want to see as elected official, but you can make decisions like if you are a homeowners association, you can make decisions what color you want your hallways painted, or what kind of expense you want to be used for road repairs, or any other sort of issue that is run usually done by the government as humans, as people. So I think it has incredible future. And the nature and the functioning of governance in the world is going to change based on new technology. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. 2-minute warning. Let's hear some final thoughts, Christine and then Nimit. And Nimit, if you would, tell us how many people you think have voted on blockchain-powered systems, if you have an idea, because I know you've been a pioneer and probably are aware of some of the other vendors as well. Go ahead, Christine.
So, gosh, I just lost my train of thought because you went 2 minutes.
Sorry.
So, as an elections official, I do believe the buck stops here with me. I don't know, there's a fundamental distrust. The higher up in government you go, Congress has one of the worst approval ratings ever. News media, big business. You've heard this sell for a while now that you should go to your trusted source, your local elections official. I am independently elected by the people that I represent, so I 100% believe in that model. That being said, I am not a technology expert. I'm not a computer expert. I rely on our business partners to provide us with products that we can give confidence to our citizens, to our electorate, because the county clerk, your elections official, truly is the voice and will for all the people in the elections process. But we can't do it alone. We need this community to be involved. We need our business partners to be involved. It takes a village. And I 100% believe in that philosophy and will end my career believing in that philosophy. This is actually I'll be on the ballot in November unopposed. Thank you.
They trust you a lot.
Yeah, and it'll be my 5th term as elected county clerk, but I've actually worked in the county clerk's program since 1995. So I've seen a world of changes since then, a lot. I'm always the glass is half full, a lot for the better good of what we do. What we're dealing with now, I would like to think, and hopefully it is just a result of the noise that's out there. But I'm always the optimist, so I continue to believe that.
Great. Nimit.
Yeah, I think your fundamental question about do we need to trust government to conduct our elections, I think if you go back into human history, you have to trust somebody to conduct a fair election. So what that somebody is keeps evolving. Initially, it was a group of trusted elders, if you go back to the Roman times. More recently, it's some form of a government-appointed institution, an independent election commission in many other countries. And I think that will evolve into some kind of independent electoral management infrastructure that might be fully digital. And then it's still going to help us elect our future governments. But we as a society would have to trust something or somebody to elect someone to represent us. So I think that fundamental piece we should not forget. As to the last question about how many people have actually used the system, if you look at government elections, not private elections, the latest count I'm aware of is about 2.5 million people globally have so far voted on an official approved blockchain-backed election system.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, sure, one comment, but we've got to wrap up. Yep. They're yanking me. Oh, we're over time. We're over time. Sorry.
This right here.
Oh, it's a ballpoint pen. Yep.
There was a time where this was an emerging technology and was not accepted in the world of quill and ink. Just remember that. Education is key. I think we need to start not just with this group. We need to start in youth, in elementary school, exposing them, just like we do to cell phones, to electronics, exposing them to what blockchain can offer, because we fear what we don't understand.
Thank you. Great closing. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you.